Éire, Mise Éire, Lorg na gCos.
Now, I take it that I don't at any time look at the camera.
Chos an full grabbing the free my hustle agus and I thought on.
Ring George Morrison écht. Seanis den chéadúr an star cortha a láthair a bhfuirm íomhana ó scór an phobail.
Den chéad bhliain brathú go bhfacha céad seachtain ó céad 8 míle duine é.
Bhíonn an chéad uair ag Mise Éire, daoine cosúil le Pádraig Mac Piarais eáil agus iad ag boga agus ag glúiseacht.
Riada with Mise Éire unleashed something. It took traditional music out of the thatch cottage and brought it right into the academy.
Bhí go súil leis an nómad sin inar tharla Riverdance agus an Eurovision. Bhí nómad fé le.
Ton tuile agus an ton eff a trá, an ní ver ton tuile duit, ver ton eff a live.
This is the very spot that I used for making the footprints in the sand for Mise Éire. My very own footprints were used. I wanted to show the permanence, impermanence in conflict of human affairs.
Mise Éire was first released in 1959 and had a momentous effect on audiences throughout the country. At the City Hall, Dublin's Lord Mayor Michael Donnelly accepted a copy of the video from Donal Moran, who first commissioned the film, which traces the emergence of modern Ireland up to the landslide victory of Sinn Féin in the election of 1918.
It was the first film to be made anywhere which contained both motion picture actuality material, still material rostrum shot, contemporary documents, graphics, architectural detail, natural phenomena, all welded together into one with specially written music.
I was only 5.5 years old when my grandmother, Catherine Hannah Morrison, brought me to the first film I'd ever seen. Rex Ingram's The Conquering Power. I adored the sequence of the old miser going mad. The marvelous detail of the hands of gold appearing from the cradle. And particularly the crowding in of the walls. That gave me an understanding of the extraordinary power of the motion picture image. From that moment on, practically, I wanted to be a film director. I was in London in 1945, and I met there Clive Gregory, professor of astronomy at the London University. I told him that I was interested in films, and he said, "What kind of films are you interested in?" And I replied, "I would like to make an epic historical documentary on Irish affairs."
Sa muid hua tuchtar lasta lochfar bauer den Asgard o Orachella. A mum na hybrid or Eskin Childers is a van, Daryl Figgis agus Moira Spring Rice, and Shin Sheer Lo Beherin.
George was so wrapped up in it that he was going to put pieces together, and we thought there might be something, maybe like about a half an hour or something, but we didn't think it would turn out as it did.
By the time he made Mise Éire, he had catalogued 300,000 feet of film, so making people aware of this huge reservoir of material, most especially from the period up to 1922. So at that level, it is of inestimable value.
Bhailí sé éabhar sa rank agus sa bhreatain, agus níor leis gáil timpeall na tíre, timpeall an dóin, ag Lorg éabhar a bhí fellúnach, agus teigú dá fasta ní bhhain gur gá dá an tábhar a bhailú, ach gur gá dá mallar tú a dheanú le thar-cíomhanna eile le tábhar a bhailú.
All my compilation films really spring from work which I began in 1952. I started work on a catalogue raisonné of Irish actuality material, that is to say, films of real events. These are scattered all over the world.
It was necessary for me to learn where everything was before I could compose what I'd had in mind.
He was prepared to go off on the boat. Everything was slogging, to get over to the various countries where he thought he could find pieces of film and bargain for it when he got there. And like nobody else would have done it.
Mr. Morrison, good to meet you. My name's Jane Fish. I'm one of the curators here in the museum's film archive. I gather you researched here in the 1950s?
Yes. In 1952, I gave myself the seemingly impossible task of making a catalogue raisonné of Irish actuality material, and that led me to visit your institution, where the most important material of the 1916 Rising was to be had.
Yes, it's one of the films in our First World War collection.
Yes.
Would you like to see it again this afternoon?
Oh, thank you very much.
If you'd like to come with me, I'll take you to the film archive.
This is Walter Cronkite, and this is Mooney's Pub in Dublin. To many people, this is Ireland, convivial and garrulous. But as with so many generalities in all countries, this is half truth, half myth. What is the real Ireland? What are its problems and its accomplishments, its aims and its frustrations?
Bhí na chuige díarna blianta bavasa agus badúirce bhí an stát éarnach ó bunaíoga an áíre. Bhí nach na míocht in rochaí, bhí díostíocht ard agus bailsciú. Bhí cuma tréachta agus seanna chaite na ceannarí polítíochta na seanna dóidí. Ach níos meas ná sin fad, bhí daoine tréigh na tíre ina mílte in áíre. Dimig os ciún 400,000 duine idir iargus fan á as an stát.
Mr. President, in 1916, what were your hopes and ambitions for Ireland?
The uprising of 1916 was an assertion in arms of the right of the Irish people to be free. We all felt that it was only in freedom that the aspirations of our people could be achieved.
She planted an evergreen for to blossom on his breast. She next knelt down to kiss his lips, but were as cold as stone, saying goodbye, goodbye, my own true love on the hills of sweet Mayo.
I worked as a dispatcher of the furniture removal business in England. Any job I could tackle was worthwhile as long as I was working on the catalogue.
There was a palpable sense of change when the mass came in.
The tide, at last, is on the turn. One man to whom a great deal of the credit must go is Taoiseach Sean Lemass. As a former Minister of Industry and Commerce, he quickly realized his country's potential as an attraction to foreign industrialists.
The possibility that things might get better instead of the conviction that they could only get worse was beginning to dawn on people.
Bhí siad anna nuaíseach mar défa agus de bhí grúpa daoine ar ó idéalacha anna áirde acha ach de chonig siad an chúis nó an gá a bhí ann le gníomhéigean nua a bheith an cín.
Can one reinstate a language that is for most speakers bare of association? Yes, says Gail Lynn, a zealous organization dedicated to the restoration of Irish. In its Dublin headquarters, only Irish is spoken.
Bhí ansin go deo acu winseoir Gaelín ag an tús, sim acu in san saoil síomsaíochta, sé sin rá riamh aim na telefíse, bhí na milliúin ag freastal ar na pictiúlanna.
A fannach le brachan le, ní ha, ach le muir le clia, a lasan na sail sin nua ag na Delphi.
Chonig Gaelín go raibh deisian sin an Gaeilge chur I láthair an phobal. Agus sách lua tréis de Gaelín a hacht ar an saoil, 1953, hosi siad é léirú sime sna sconáin.
Afarc éireann na léirú ag Gaelín. Ag ggéirfartó clia a féinálan éirlingas na mrá spéide.
Hosi sé mar nuas ganán Mise Éire agus fiera leis an tóir a bhíar, bhí sé ar taspáint go 7
Agus tá na hinneach í gairí níos casta a na bliana agus níos éfachtaí, ach ar ceapú inil fás chuirh stop le Klaus an na Veliméri faoin Hampshire.
Colm O'Leary was making the Overcairn series, and he commissioned me to direct a couple of issues, and that led to a meeting with Bob Magara and ultimately with O'Moran.
Part of our work has been the image building, which has made Irish fashionable. Irish, after all, has been brought into the cinema, into the theatre by Gaelin, into cabaret shows, into popular entertainment.
In my meeting with O'Moran, I launched the idea of making Mise Éire.
Sa leabharlan náisiúnta tá bailúcháin seans ganán a bhanas le 8 néireann le 60 bliana nuas. Farir níl an seo ach cuidig an omláin cábhfuil a chuideile. Le 5 bliana déag tá seoirse mac le uire á Lorg chuile áit agus á scrúdú. Rá bhlíonóchan dír Gaelínear scanán omláin a agrúasta. Chunne sé ó híran na Eorpa 300,000 a baint le éireann.
Talamh uair a bhí a trá ag an daithram a ggófart lena chéile. Agus go raibh George Morrison ag chur na féise a chur sé ribhe a rithe héal a grí.
Chaurí Catlín í bhrín leis ag táhail na raircannaí. Chaurí an fearr Catlín Seán ó brín sa 100 milligan abair na raircannaí go léir ag ramú le chéile in na srahannaí.
We bought a house out in Monkstown, and it was very sparsely furnished. For our table, we had a big cardboard box, and the front living room, sitting room, we had nothing in it. So George hammered in the racks, and when he got his bits of film, he hung them up on that. Friends would say, what are those racks in there? And we say, oh, that's going to be a film about Ireland.
When production began, I had to ensure that a steady flow of material from these various collections should feed into my cutting room.
It was never timed or anything, just to be a knock on the door and there'd be George, and thrilled with that he had more pieces of film, bits of film. It was in the very infancy in my house. Once he moved, it got bigger and bigger then.
Now what we have to do is to break it entirely down scene by scene. Put all those scenes into the rack and then rearrange them into their correct order once again. Put them all together, and only then can creative cutting begin.
No, I wouldn't say obsessive, but enthusiastic. You have to have a certain amount of enthusiasm to give life to whatever you do, in my opinion.
It was a wonderful, happy atmosphere. George, well, he was the driving force. He was so enthusiastic that he dragged us all along with him. Nobody minded working late, weekends or whatever. It was just good fun.
Adring fad, the bhí scetamíní go háirithe le Mise Éire, mar ba rud aontach nua é seo, scanán fada a bheith á dhéanamh. Is tócha an léir is móna daoine teachta céimeach amach san ifig. The bhíoch George isté, nó the bhíoch Sean O'Reilly isté, nó bhíoch Louis Marcus.
Tí réad na teidir an Skyline, thugad agur thóir cúnta orm, a chuna fíring rá bhí ról anéimeach fád agam, bhí an obair chrothach go thomláin I lámh George. Siad a thárlóch ná nuair a thiocach sé ag puinte gur bhá leis an seata dheara de chuireach sé marc an son le peann Louis Chinograph. An son de rachach sé ag an céad seacht eile agus chuireach sé marc ag go buinte in bhis an seat sin a hosnú. Now bhí ormsa an dá fiasa a ceangail le céile rud a tugu joiner le cement. Bhí ormsa a lánama a chahabh sa leabhar le náisiúnta a féchaint na sean nuachtáin. Now the bheadh lista agam ó George dus na himachtaí a bhí gceist éiríamach na casca nó taucháin nó péarad a bhí gceist agus de híing an seo a dult sé na nuachtáin agus a géirí na cínlínta na aimsú.
Na daine sin na maríoch cos life, tugach sachrid bhórdóibh le dord ceol mar bhúil agus cídeocht óglach fé na gonaí gnóhíchan láud.
Gins na léhananta sin, ní rá star na héireann san fihuíis á bhúna ins na scoilina, so bhí mise a fálam na starach faoi ná ba bhí mé a dult sé na nuachtáin.
Inis héin tá cinúint na díise chá sacarú. Is mé súla tá díirithe charcar chiil bhaináin, dréim le freagara I gceist ná leofar a chur. Cattá in nándóibh, cattá in nándóibh.
This is the famous Kilmainham jail, where the 1916 leaders were executed, and consequently I had to get in here to film in the interiors. But I was delighted to find such an original piece of stonework, and I made the most of it in the film, as you can see. Took particular care to feature the 5 serpents. The flashes of the serpents' heads represent the irrevocable act of shooting somebody. I thought there would be nothing to it. I applied, of course, to the Board of Works, and they turned me down, to my surprise. So I said to myself, there is nothing for it but Dev himself. And he said, leave it with Mr. Morrison, I'll see what I can do. When I eventually got here, I realized the reason for my being prohibited. The building was nearly derelict. The main hall was in a most deplorable condition. The glass was all gone. There were plants and ferns growing on the steps and festoons everywhere.
Iscrifan náman lá a rinne mar siútáil I bríosún Kilmainham, agus bhí sé sin scanrúil go leor caitham rá. Ní raibh dhéanamh agamsa ach tealamh úmpar. Bhí sé am ghéire, tháinig tisim na híthe lua go leor, agus má bhí an gholamach ag an car chun rudachcinnta áilt, bhí an dul tré na corridor sin sa dorachas, agus bhí sé uafásach scanrúil.
This is the very door which I used in Mise Éire. I wanted to maintain the tensions and follow that by a quick flash of the serpent head, and followed in turn by the photographs of the men executed. These exceptionally brave men I think of constantly. I regard Mise Éire as being a great anti-imperialist document.
I saw the film as a very young, when I was at primary school. The manner of his death only really came home to me watching the film. That extraordinary sequence where the executions are shown with the firing of a shot and the faces appear. And it was the sudden impact of that, watching it. You realised, well, the brutality of the executions, I suppose, and then the long drawn-out nature of them.
There's one shot of Tom Clark, which I believe is the only known piece of film showing Tom Clark, and he's turning to smile at someone and talk. You could see suddenly why people liked Tom Clark. He looked like a person you might like, that you might talk to, and he was greatly loved in his family. He was seen as a person with great sense of humour, played with his kids. He made people laugh. It's not at all the image you get of him as this driven, bitter revolutionary, but he was both of these things, perhaps.
You didn't have to be fluent in Irish to follow the storyline. It was incredible. The idea of using essentially what was British propaganda footage to make a film about our own revolution, as a propaganda exercise, if you like, if you want to see it that way, was an extraordinary, almost revolutionary in itself to have done that, you know. We owe such a debt of gratitude to George Morrison, I mean, for the work he's done. Because if you think, had Mise Éire never been produced, what would we have?
Sé Peter Hunt a rinnean fómraíon gan scanán idir caint agus ceol faoi stúró Heorsha. Ba iad na trochtarí Liam Boulet agus Pádraig O'Reilly is Radio Éireann. Sráidí chanil Black Lia ar éis Éire amach 1970. Agus seachaí Mise Éire déanta in Éireann ag Éireannaí.
When he was approached to do the commentary, he was really very excited when he heard the whole content of it. And then as he went to work on it, I know he was amazed at the amount of archive work that was there to be covered. The sessions would go on. Sometimes they'd be in Peter Hunt's studios till 1 and 2 in the morning. There was a tremendous camaraderie really between them all. They were good friends, quite apart from being workmates. And Peter Hunt was meticulous. George Morrison, they all were. It was a labour of love, really, for all those connected with it.
Another look at me Shamra Shan, and I come me Shana Gobber. Agus Hog Shan Shamasha, Agus Nularos a Hume, Dihomrella, Timpuneric Shaska Kuig no Martian. Ashahan top hatching Shan. For session in the Navy Shaggy. So can we just glanag so stuck the RT come. So you listen could an current vigor and tap it. No, well, at Glorm, on the darling Dawson or Vohim Denegin team na Balahimiad or Homegant. Like some Balahavi Homaher gone in and Balahana cigars, no cigarillas. That Buskin son not taking temple. Shin with the Hachs, eh? Shrewd Sigasina Buskishan temple. So there, Nistericht game on Balaha. So being a Skungucha temple and son.
It seemed as if the whole of Ireland belonged to the world of Mise Éire. He was, above all else, the artist with the common touch, the musician and composer who had rekindled in ordinary people a respect and a pride in their heritage.
Shangrala Shanashun, Shangrala Elana Hearn, Agus Shanin on Mochan as Hjol. Ta trí átown ta inisfáil fóla agus éirú éireann ó éirú os na Celtic agus nod physiciúil na leán áling uine a lár na farige agus an son fóla i leán na nolavas na naamh mar defa agus chríoch fáil an son áit na leichra agus go fiúm cúil agus na fian agus cúchaling is it agus an sais gra óvásach daint na vinnig dinne. Snenod a spragan mócháin agus is mócháin páin an ceol. As sne vi gesle Mise Éire agus sne kus gur víog sé or daigint glos na daine vi géisteach leis an ceolsin. Mar dainidir an touchstone an gribh sean treis gur sé ngrá leis an tír.
Go carchorchi in idir Shascané, chun céim sa cheol a leanúnt. Si an verte bhí I ganas reine cheol ag an amstan ná an talamh Alice Fleischmann agus an riad a chéin. Cá tú smaoinemh gur ceol utópach Mise Éire. Sa trí céanna gur dán utópach dán cosúla filarís de chuid Sean ó Riordan an fila Corcaíoch, a bhí an seo I gorcaigh ag an am géalna. Ná fiúháin má chuireann tú ceol an scanán Mise Éire ar siúl agus má dean tusa na focail son mar voice-over. Sin é a choras dún chuoin fé hollas an tránóna, búl is oscalófer, tintin féin is de chló cheart. Téan an dárod go céile, tá dlú ceangal idir an smaoinemh céanna.
There is not a European classical music tradition in this country. There is, on the other hand, a highly developed traditional music, which, because it's orally transmitted, must not be considered essentially as folk music. For example, in the Orient, you have music which is orally transmitted but is still highly developed. Yeah. You have the court music of Japan, for example, and the Korean novices music, that kind of thing. Here we also have highly developed traditional music, very complex, very sophisticated, but it's more Oriental than Western.
We got on splendidly from the first. We recognized our mutual intelligence. That was the key. He played me the music on piano, and I fell in love with it straight away.
Buineann siú asáid dar nóid tá aithnig marándíine an príomh héime Róisín dómh. Is tóca fuair sé géirí ó Seán de Hóra. Agus ag deire. Ach buineann siú asáid freisin as an árán seanós a chmúr slíomh na mán. A fuair sé cinnte ó Nicholas Tobin I Rhino Gúnach ó Ceann Helvig. Dar nó Lennon an runsin araig. Ach nuair a hosníonn sé le slíomh na man. Téann sé díreach isteach ag deire den fríorthéime Róisín Dómh. So, is sin a ríis. In éire ag an am san sin ré Seán le Meas. Bhí mothúcháin bródúil le chloisint, le feiscint, le bhothú in San Éire go generálta ag an am. Nuair a tháinig ciúil Mise Éire, bang, the right music at the right time. Díreach de tháinig rud éigean ag a buinte son. Sa trí sinde bhí sé go sú leis an nómad sin inar tharla Riverdance agus an Eurovision. Bhí nómad fé le agus de tháinig an ceolaid go ranca son ag an nóméid son. Cinnte le Mise Éire de tháinig an fuaim sin díre ag a buinte sin.
What effect did you want to have on the audience?
Oh, I want to reassure them of their worth.
Well, I think the Walter Molly night Latio da Yellow Shadow show. We and Schneider Hul, we Shammer Teki or Boxer Tekiji. We Bally Hulshan, Agus, we Shoe, she's a show boy. We see her, E.T. shouldn't go see her E.T. show. I have a show kid, we show you Sergeant and I get a Tasha. Agus, we show you the showing the point around the place, Colisus, Hoy Scalan. Agus, Hoya shall like dear his than you like Hoya and Paptola. Shaw will faculous ready than Hurti. Shouldn't say not a faculty than Factualis home. Why him a radio that the head, when it's Canadian, taking me the right. There's some cacu, Trihabian, a Caribbean, where Harlow had to Caribbean, so let anyone be premier, like head Tashpantis, that Mise Éire and Gidoi. Has I this more I'm sure punching the radio, so now just happy to cake with behind.
se hagan scanna gaji lidor. Vi an Hallison, vi se package go dar som hísin agus chorsa intas go jar glíní go le hedge scanna an na go vethi le hedge scanna na chor file. Agus is cymni am dini hecht agam san iation ráine gomaro. Agus a rá, well, dóla much back an star scal agus dóla mud rud fai ó dóna agus ó níl an na níl agus iad sinile, but ní rosa gan riamh gur mario an na dini sin a mala clia mar a mario.
Bhí óran í néid pacailte go dearas. Agus nuair a bhí characan an fásta, because bhí sé ar coiú, agus í tíní na bhuiar coiú na róséasta.
Ach táach égus a fé glasí galibh go fóil, agus a brísúne a gampaí géhann hasanna tá na mílte eile gail fé glas. Tá an scéal a lethe áfach go bhfuil tránna fuascailt ar láimh agus nach fada go mína firítíocht a bhaile, ach an fáilte bheith rompa nó dohal nó patuire. Is gear go nocht for eigen an fabil.
A hóg sem a chrísa, agus hóg sem a manam, agus chor se brád cinne, agus brád néis an brád cinne go héigi. A mé mdine brádal is ginne héin, bet in níos móna brádal is an tír, má hégan te látna. Bhfuil is a gud, agus na sé tíní tanin, insaf choráise seo, bhfuil mórgan ar a ginne héin, agus ar a sré héin. Na chun í cymne, chum a duine máthas na tailte maithe an sarlagan agus an ina seáin, agus ní roiit a béle leháil. Hanní na daine an seo, fuaisiad rópa go déh fuaisiad portaí agus an se taldó. Fuaisiad scraban agus an se tarraithe. Agus daine bhí abal sinnéanú, bhí siad leidir, bhí siad cruaí, agus bhí seo halíg sa rud a hanig am an Mise Éire.
Bhí se go dollar fád an seo gan am sin, an dollar fád in America. Ó lár na gaigití bhí se gimat, go halaban go mór óir an tam sin agus go London. Jean nahfuil tear an bháile seanna se an na fearsta, nach mó daoine go bar an halaban.
Sílam sa gur hóg a seáil agus hóga scanhansin, hóg se brádas na daoine agus chaisiid a smitiú ar íist, gadan ar me go hág sin, daoine bread hanne, why not? Rud bhaine sí go rud éicealt fuar léomh, rud le éicealt ar scanan agus ceála agus rud leis tógann se brí, tógann se manúin agus tógann se spirid na daoine, agus sin rud a dhéanú spirid, agus de arcú úr ag na daoine gur ma duine tamaran, jo me de máthas tá ma deabla trid, hanig me de chéine leidir.
Mise Éire, ag géadisiúnt pebliim le clia, hí báil góglaí na héireann agus gan aram carga ón, lenam ratach an cíochta agus na réalta.
Bhí séisiúil a mí fiabhra méideag seaca, agus de hit úlach riarcháin sin. Orm sa mar ar nóid a bhí curí a gceist le haid a chud is móda sin.
Anna catáard huir agus a bhean ag géadtas pontas. Beir caiir lech gaelinn don lo móráin fáilte raibh fiantí ó cealla agus a bhean.
Bhí an bus ítach mar an gradam a bhain leis an ócáid agus an bailachán an a dtíine mór le rá seo. Bhí me hasfann sin agus tá sé tosaí. Ar nóid bhí an tuachtarán ann.
Ócáid speisialta ag an uachtarán teacht ag scanán in a bhfuil sé héan pórteach.
I didn't have any doubts about Dev's appreciation. I felt that he would like it.
Bhí áthas ach faoisimh inta na iontach mar go rairigh go maith leis ach faoise go maith. Cé go nabrí ména.
remember like a silence when it was over. People were, it churned you up really, you know, the history, your own history. And there was a lot of congratulations, of course, and a great deal of, satisfaction.
Léirú leabhar Seán Ó Dúnling son na Seán Óglach. An sin chur Dún Lá Móráin seosamach le huire stúrtharan scanáin in Nanagan Fabel.
When the film is finished, the umbilical cord is cut, and then it has to survive on its own. The work that you have done has to survive on its own.
Don chéad rian brathú go bhfacha céad seachtain ó céad 8 míle duine é. Ní raibh aon áit in éireann nach bhfacachas é.
In those days in the north, at the end of the pictures, the national anthem was played, which was the signal frequently for riot, or one half of the crowd trying to get out the door and the other half trying to stop them as God Save the Queen was played, you know. So that there was no neutral area of culture. In fact, the most divisive thing was culture.
Wad solar ó trachtar bí Mise Éire, bhí an Gaelic faoi áras an inchin codhmór den phobal éondachtach an san tuaisceart. Ach war an tauris an aimseir Mise Éire, agus rinne galóir iarachtaí bac a chur an scanan.
Unionists were terribly concerned about Irish culture. Maybe they thought it was subversive. Irish dancing, Irish language, all that sort of stuff had to be, you know, got rid of like diphtheria or tuberculosis. So this film arrived.
Nuair a bhí na gnáis eilecha Corrigrí, bhailligh na hóglaigh na mílte in ein bhuar faráid a bhain, an faráid bhó riamhacha, síos go Smithfield, átar hasadar a géisteach le hóráidí os na Cinnerí.
Balla cólach ní mór Britanach a codhhaid na pictar anna an san tuaisceart, agus is cinse nach má éon bhaid agus siúd le pictar mar seo. Dá bhrí sin Hannick and Codges Momo to Nadini and St. Tushgert and picture Holly Pobble, Holly Parishte, Holly Clubben the Common Local Scale.
Scavan Amanish, Gorashain Tajakar and Amani, they kinch go much abalta, Cognac Suez, Lash and their father, you know, I guess 35 millimeters away. But they are going to Karaku, I guess Amani do such much, really 16. Agus bhí sé ionta Jackar an amlaí beidir daoine eile sin a brú agus mar sin agus is seo ar a bhrisciad síos agus dar air sin, you know. Brinn muid go bhór aigeid Mise Éire ag an am sin. Agus bhí sé an ach conta a go gealú agus an san chuide smód an na bailte móra.
It was a multitude of strange experiences because obviously the nationalist myth was very powerful in the film, and if you lived in the north it was the souls in purgatory looking across the border at the souls in heaven. And there was a sense about Mise Éire that independence had been achieved. It was all past tense, where for us, we were on the outside looking into all of this, and therefore it deepened the sort of nationalist yearning in a sense. Well, even now, all these years later, I can still remember the impact it had. And we talked in school, we talked for days afterwards about it. And the classes talked about it. Even watching the effect it had on the teachers. It was that big.
Tá cartlan an chiimseach agin in Seaingélín maidir le déanamh Mise Éire agus na léirithe agus conas mar a lábhseáil Gaelín an gnáir fad. Chun chur leis an díocht na ticéad bhartaí Gaelín an sin Cada Éirí an Raon Éideachais an méoch sé in glacathe go méoch daltaí scaile ag freastal na scanáin agus tá freigre th ceann rúnaí na rinne a rá nach gcuirfar I gcuine daltaí an gcuigiú rang sa bhunscail suas a ligean séir. Agus an tor a bhí sin feicimiid an seo chapéis eile. All records at the Regal Cinema have been broken in the first week's showing of the Gaelin film Mise Éire. Today, some 900 children attended the first show and 800 the second.
An scoil anspéisialta bhí go láiste bhfuil ins na caigadaí agus na seascadaí leid. Da bhí brú uafásach ann, brú intlach dúil, brú acadúil, bhí anna bhéim scrúdathe agus rudí den taithí. Agus scoil annáisiúnach a bhí an amachchas amach. Bégan nar cathach amach mé hain chur is ceis láháin tréis cúntas mór a dhéan an brathair a bheitú pádraig go píris agus éirí amach na cásca. Agus díras ná bhar an rud é marach áil sun na tíre, ná bása áil sun na tíre. Correct, dis bhar duiste. Ach scoil annáisiúnach a bhí an.
An starra múnach doing na seacht cúisina leis an gorta. Na Sasnig agus na Sasnig. Agus sin nótaí star na hhéireann sin a tugadh ar na leabhar.
Agus tháinig deire le star na hhéireann.
Ó Jesus de tháinig.
Éad an níos sin.
Níor roiineh flank, níor trocht ar bethir. No, trocht ar bethir.
Ógchaid ansuntas a bhí an, agus ógchaid anhéilech a bhí an.
Agus Gaelín a bhí, freisin agus bhí buinte Gaelín leis an scoil agus le daoine in Gaelín le mórán agus daoine mar sin le bhí Cadre Fagoni agus tagabáil.
Bhí a bhéh ceis go méocha an brathair a bheitú ag géirí cadó na tuismathirí an rang hiúlagan sios. Dúir sé leis an tuismathirí.
Dína dul scada.
Thugtar isteach na scolanna imlách le lánghilech. Ceannas mó cláistúir agus beidir gur scoil Catréine ann agus cúmar síos go dtí an Regal agus an ihe sin bhí an premier ann leis na déamh agus na gréitin de gúd agus. Ach bhí mar an deochlach tríochlach an trána ribhna daoine sin.
Bhí sé go mór chun tosaigh ar aon rud eile le is cutting edge bhí an ó thaobh cuasaí scannaíochta ar an géadúil síos ó thaobh an statachas a bhaint den na seanna scanán go raibh ar ná an taachtartha ó thaobh an ceol le tá an ceol th cín. Úr agus cóchtach is stólam agus a bhín ar a hana sé amach. Beidir go bhfuil sé ábharlín beag níos náisiúnaí ar bhealach beag ná mar a bheith daon faoin nó bheith.
É dhearan na seachtaine, bhí lár na catharach ina brús gur ag bombardáil na Sasanach. Tá an deire chur le léiscris agus torta folla, chin an piersach ar géile.
Tá na ceiste na céine inis le cur is a currah an éideach séideach agus an forógra agus cóhananas agus gachsáis rud mar sin. Tá le na bun ceiste na fiol sin tá si tug ar rais ar bhealach.
Tásúla go go méid crut níos fearr an dír I ngábhíle sa séide seachtá inis. Beidh an ceiste chunspóideach céine ann an bhfuil féin bhuiíle going an bhfuil neas blachas fíornach a going agus bé annach chuid cur agus cúte fa sin. Cadtá déanta going leis an neas blachas.
Ní donna go réiteoig, ní réitiíonn scanán den taith sin na ceistena sin, ach léiríonn siad cadaíd na cúnsaí inar tugach faoine ceistena sin ag gabhmhartha agus méidir don chéadúir gur airní leis.
In Ardmach a Has, tá sin féin ag léas a rís chun córach táchain, agus gabhad chun cibhlinte leis a bártaí parlaméide. Tá cinnarí na gluaiseach dán, Darrell Figgis in a mask.
Some people have called it propagandist. It didn't strike people so at the time. It was a very skillful film, a combination of creativity and fact. It wasn't untrue, but yet there was a type of poetic or artistic license taken which conveyed the spirit and in a sense the actuality of the period.
History is always a construct. It is a made thing in the present at each moment. It is made at an ideological level. It is made through its selection of imagery. History is also selected by the archive. What survived? What has been photographed originally? Who has photographed it? How the choices have been made to what has been photographed? Who are the cameramen?
Is instant Mise Éire legan áirithe de scéal na hÉireann. Caithfear breanúir nos gur cinál artefact ann féine gur instant conas mar a bhí an léamh ag puinte áirithe ama. Agus is dóigh gur bin an spreaga a bhí ag glúiseach do Gaeilge mar hampla ag an am gur méid ar stát hain ar boblacht hain agus go méid an Gaeilge a nuachtar mar hanga. Nóid ní mar sin na hála ach Iirecht a bhí stáilm sa scána an Mise Éire a crothú go raibh sé fós ingénta agus ag géirí sais an tíorgrá sin spreaga agus ag súil go méich an pobl leistír de Gaelén ins na hiireachtaí a bhí ar bonach siúd ar bhaile sin Gaeilge.
Come on. Ní bhíon mar an trócraí colorin. Abhach maithir se na gairí fúnis begáin beidirich. Sminnig bhí sé féinnig sa bhd cin. Ceola sé ceol. Tá sé na gairí miainach berg an dolamach. Tá fic me sé verbal.
I am very glad and proud to have made Mise Éire, and it is not a film that can quickly be forgotten.